Hey everyone, what's everyone having for dinner tonight? Well, Javier and I are going to be having steak, frozen green beans, obviously that I will cook, and homemade mashed potatoes. So I'm not going to show you guys too much in regards to the steak or the green beans, but we are definitely going to learn how to make homemade mashed potatoes in this video. So what you're going to need is a pot, and obviously this depends on how many mashed potatoes, how much mashed potatoes you're making. I'm using one that's this big, if that helps anyone. It's pretty deep, so this is what I'll be using. I'm going to go ahead and start my water. I like to get it hot, or at least to a boil, while I get the rest of everything ready. So I'm going to get this started here. And when you're making mashed potatoes, you definitely want to make sure you're using enough water to where the potatoes are covered with the water, obviously. Now, for Javier and I will be using 4 potatoes. There's 3. I need to grab one more. And then obviously, depending on the size of the potatoes, you may want to use more, you may want to use less. So I am using 4 potatoes, but I'm going to wash. Well, first I'm going to peel them, and then I'm going to wash them off and then cut them. Now, you don't have to peel your potatoes. You could also peel them like halfway, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So, if you wanted to leave some peels, you would just leave a mark, or peel the potato, leave some skin, peel the potato, leave some skin. I personally want mine completely without the skin, so no skin in my mashed potatoes. But again, I think it's great when we have options. So if you want the skins on the potatoes, again, definitely something you can keep. If you don't have a potato peeler, you can use a knife. And usually you just want to peel towards you, as you can see, but very carefully. It is a more time-consuming process, but it can definitely be done using just a knife as well. I also do not have a potato masher. So, if we're like looking for every single reason why you cannot make mashed potatoes from scratch at home, not even that one I'm going to say is a qualifier. Like, it's not. I don't have a potato masher, and I make mashed potatoes quite a bit. The trick would be, in my opinion, that you've got to get the potatoes soft enough to where you can mash them with a fork or a spoon, whatever you can find. And if you've never peeled potatoes or carrots before, you just want to go down. So you just take the peeler, place it on the skin. Oh, there goes that potato. Obviously, you're going to want to have a firm grip on it, or it's going to end up in the trash. All right, so now we've got the potatoes peeled. Oh my goodness, I'm awesome with the potatoes today. By the way, the water for my potatoes is on a medium heat. Alright, now we are just going to wash the potatoes. And now you're just going to cut the potatoes into cubes. So I like to cut them down the middle the long way, flip them down the middle again. So you should have 4 pieces going the long way. And then just cutting them like that. Like giant cubes, I guess. I'm not sure. So the thicker the potato is, the longer it's going to take to cook, as far as when you're chopping it up or cutting it up. So you don't want to have, you know, huge pieces that you're trying to get soft making mashed potatoes. Maybe 1/2-inch cuts. And again, it doesn't need to be perfect. It's going to be in a pot, getting soft to be mashed up. So the idea is just you don't want to be waiting around forever for your potatoes to get soft. All right, and so we've got our potatoes, we've got our water. It's not quite boiling, and that's okay. And you want to be careful when you do this. I don't honestly do it like this. This is a little different because of my laptop being in my way. But that water is hot, so be careful if it's splashing up on you. All right, and then as you can see, again, you want to have enough water in your pot to where your potatoes are covered. And at this point, I'm going to turn up the heat to, here we have medium, and this one is high. So I'm going to put it almost in between the two of them, not quite, but on an almost high setting. And now I'm going to prep our steaks that I will be cooking tonight. Again, this feature is more so for the mashed potatoes. But I'll show you guys how I do my steak as well. Now these steaks are huge. They've got some pretty good thickness to them. Usually Javier and I can eat a thin steak each, so I'm not too sure. I really don't think we're going to eat both of these tonight. And what I like to do when we don't eat both of them is make chili with the leftover steak. So I do have a video regarding how to do that. I'll post that here soon. But let's get back to, and again, just another alternative if you have leftover steak. Because in my opinion, steak does not taste the same the next day at all. Like, it doesn't. It's just good when it's fresh off the grill. And of course, it needs to be a certain type of cut as well. T-bones, ribeyes, sirloins would be on the bottom of that list. I normally just try to leave it in the packaging, but it's been this absorbing thing has been glued down, and I just don't want to play with that. So I'm going to wash my hands and get a plate to put these on. Which works a little better because what I would like to do, I use Worcestershire, I don't know, this stuff. This Worcestershire, I don't know. I use this. And I use garlic salt. And a steak and chop seasoning. Right. And then I'm going to just add a little bit more seasoning on the top of it. And a little more garlic salt. And this side seems to have enough seasoning, which is great. So I'm going to just leave those there. And I really like to stack them. So I'm going to leave them stacked like that. I have read that cooking steak, not as if it were really, really cold, but letting it kind of warm up first is a good idea. I used to cook steak with Coca-Cola, and actually it was a friend of mine who used to do that, not me. I guess I consider it me because I was there, but it wasn't me ever really cooking it like that. And that was really good too. I'm just sweeping up the potato peels that I got all over the floor. Okay, so the potatoes are boiling, and I know I am horrible about keeping everybody up to speed, how many minutes, how much of anything. So I'm going to turn on the timer for 20 minutes, and these are just going to boil for 20 minutes. I'm not going to touch them. Okay, I'm going to add a little bit of salt, just because I like to think that the salt is being absorbed into the potato. So, okay, added salt. It's on almost a high setting. And we've got a timer set for 20 minutes, and we're just going to leave it. Okay. I am going to go ahead and get my grill started. Again, I'm just going to leave these mashed potatoes running for you all to see. And I'm also going to be getting the green beans ready that we are having for dinner tonight. And the green beans, I'm just adding salt and pepper. And of course, I am adding butter. Again, I'm not turning these on. I'm just prepping it so that it's ready to be turned on. So I guess we should have talked about the other ingredients involved in making mashed potatoes. So you obviously have your potatoes, you're going to need milk, and you're going to need real butter. Okay, you can use whatever non-butter substance you want, but as we all know, I prefer real butter. So again, potatoes, milk, and butter, salt and pepper, and then you can get really creative with the potatoes too, and we'll get into that here shortly. Because a lot of people, well, some people like gravy, some people don't like gravy. So I like to look at these as like your basic starter mashed potatoes from scratch at home. And then if you wanted to get creative with it, you could throw in some cheddar cheese, some bacon bits, some sour cream, to make them like a loaded mashed potato. Or you can make homemade gravy. I do that as well, but I'm not doing that today. Mainly because I need the dripping drippings from the meat, and I'm not going to have that grilling steak. So, right, we've got 14 minutes left on the potatoes. You're also going to want a fork so that you can test and see. Oh, they're already getting soft, which is good. Again, if you have more potatoes in your pot, it's probably going to take longer to boil them as well. You can also use a strainer to drain the water from the potatoes when they're ready. I, of course, don't do that because that's one more thing I have to wash. So I'm going to just be using a lid when I drain my potatoes. Also, if you don't have milk, you can use half and half. I would even maybe say heavy whipping cream. I don't see why not. Maybe even evaporated milk. Now, keep in mind, depending on how soft your potatoes are, is really going to determine the consistency of your mashed potatoes. So I personally like mine a little more chunky. I don't care for them to be completely smooth. So that's something else you're going to want to keep in mind when you're boiling your potatoes is, well, how do I want these really? Do I want them soft to where they're just going to whip up? Do you want like a whipped potato? Do you want a chunky mashed potato? Those are kind of, I'm just going to do what I do, and you guys can figure it out from there if or when you guys make your batch. So I have never actually used a timer when timing my potatoes to see how long it takes for them to get soft. So, like having the timer is really throwing me off as opposed to like actually helping me. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab a potato with a fork like this between the pot and the fork, and if I can squish it, I know I'm ready to make mashed potatoes. So as you can see, I'm ready to make mashed potatoes. The timer says we still have 6 minutes, but honestly, that timer was just something I really winged because again, I don't put timers on when I cook. A lot of it is just kind of going and doing it as I'm going. So first things first, turn your burner off for the mashed potatoes. Then we're going to come over to the sink and drain them. And again, you can use a strainer. I think it's important you do and use what works for you. I'm just using a lid. And you want to make sure you've got all of that water out of there. All right. And then we've got our potatoes. So this burner is going to be hot. Obviously, we just turned it off. I don't recommend putting the potatoes back on there. You're going to want to set your pan, or your pot rather, aside. This is when we're going to add the butter. I'm going to do roughly 1/2 to 1/4 of a stick of butter. That would have been a disaster. And as you can see, I'm just using a spatula here to mash them up against the side. And this is a pretty heavy duty, I believe it's just a rubber spatula. So you want to get it to where all your potatoes are mashed. Again, if you want them chunky, leave them chunky. If you don't, then continue to smash them or mash them until they are what you'd like. I'm making the biggest mess here. Okay. If you have a fork, you can just go ahead and start to use that now too, if you're comfortable doing that in your pot. And I also have steaks cooking, so while you're mashing up your potatoes with a fork or a spatula, I'm going to check on those and I'll be back. All right, so this is where I would recommend adding the salt and pepper and milk. And garlic salt. You don't have to add garlic salt, but I'm going to add garlic salt. And then you want to grab your butter, or I'm sorry, your milk. Clearly, I want to add more butter, and I may. I'm using whole milk, and you don't want to overkill it on the milk. It will ruin the potatoes very, very quickly. I suggest adding a little bit, adding it in, and then going from there. Because honestly, you can end up with some really nasty, watery mashed potatoes, milky rather, if you just go adding a whole bunch of milk. So I would start with like 1/4 cup, and then I would increase from there. this is actually pretty good. And again, if you see like, oh, my potatoes are still chunky, I don't want them like that, you can still squish them, mash them. When you're done with your mashed potatoes, I suggest removing them from the burner, putting a lid on them, and letting them just sit. So here are homemade mashed potatoes. I'm going to go see if Javier wants to put anything fun in them, like bacon and cheese, and make them loaded. Let's go see. Javier, do you want any cheese or bacon in the potatoes, or do you want them just plain? Because I'm not making gravy tonight.
Yeah, probably cheese and bacon.
Cheese and bacon? There's our timer for the potatoes, but they're done, so yay. Almost, anyway. So Javier said yes to the potatoes or to the bacon and cheese. I'm also going to add some sour cream. And it's really just a tiny bit that I'm adding, maybe a tablespoon and a half. And small handful of cheese. And then I've just got some real bacon pieces here that I'm using. And we're going to get all that mixed around, but I do want to check on the steaks. They were looking really good. They had the marks on them very nicely. So let's go check them out. Oh yeah, these are done. And they're pretty. I don't know if you guys can see the marks on them. Just turning everything off. All right, so back to these potatoes we decided to load. And it's really just a matter of mixing all of those ingredients together. Very easy. And now we've got loaded mashed potatoes. All right, and then let's just check out the steaks because I think I did a decent job on them. Not sure. We've got just a nice pink center there. They've got the char marks. I'm so proud of myself. All right, so it's time to eat. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. I'd love to know what you guys are having for dinner. And I guess that's it. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great dinner.